Delayed
Yeah.
remorse is almost always connected to dysregulation and stress and
Mhm.
anxiety. A lot of our individuals with FASD or other neurodivergence, we have these moments where we freeze. We go
Mhm.
into the freeze, fight, flight when we get down into that
Yeah.
primitive brain and the survival
Yeah.
amygdala. We go into, and so sometimes it's blurting out, sometimes it's verbal aggression, all of these different things. And
Mhm.
in that moment, most of the time they cannot see it. And this happens all the time, but maybe a few hours later, but a lot of times it might be a day or two later,
Mm.
because for neurodivergent people with trauma histories, it can take at least 24 hours to
Yeah.
completely recover from a stressful thing.
Yes.
For
Yeah.
neurotypical people without a ton of trauma, it takes usually 2 hours for our bodies to completely recover
Mhm.
physically and emotionally.
Mm.
We're often sitting here with this
And
individual trying to talk through this, and they're
yeah.
not ready yet.
Welcome back to Living with FASD, another episode, and I'm bringing back to the mic my good friend and colleague Barb Clark, fellow social worker, fellow trauma expert, fellow passionate FASD advocate and author. Barb, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back.
Yeah. So I reached out to you, and I just kind of knew from the first time we sat down and chit-chatted that I wanted to have you on the podcast periodically because you have so
Mhm.
much wisdom and you're doing so many things. I know you've launched your own business in recent month, and I see you really taking off with it. So I'm so happy for you. But you made a post the other day, and I was like, we've got to do a deep dive on that on the program.
Yeah.
And so for this mini series, well, it's not that many, right? If it's every other week for a year.
Mhm.
For
Yep, that's not many.
for for this series where we're doing deep dives into challenges that neurodivergent people can have,
Mhm.
I think we need to spend some time teasing out a couple things that can
Yeah,
look very similar
right.
but are not necessarily so. And we have to best serve someone that we're supporting. We really have to be able to tease them out
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
recognize when and how to help a person through a situation. So it's denial, first of all, anosognosia, and I'm going to challenge the audience to practice saying that 5 times fast.
When I
And
first learned about it, I had to say it a million times. I kept having, the internet
right?
say it, and I kept repeating it. It takes a while.
A tongue twister all within one word.
Yes.
And and the third thing is delayed remorse, and they can
Mhm.
look very similar, but really
Mhm.
they're 3 different processes going
Mhm.
on.
Yeah, very.
So what are your thoughts on that before we start doing a deep dive into each individual element that we just brought up?
Oh, there those so it's really complicated, right? Because some of it is brain-based, some of
Mhm.
it is, like denial is not necessarily brain-based. That is kind of a different thing. And that's why I'm kind of passionate about sharing about anosognosia, because it is a
Mhm.
brain-based
Mhm.
disorder that is really commonly co-occurring thing that
Yeah,
goes with a lot of different neurodivergence, but it's
yeah,
almost always missed. And like
yeah,
I've talked to many psychologists, doctors, and they've never heard of it. It's very misunderstood, and it's similar to
yeah,
fetal alcohol.
yeah, yeah. And even those doctors and psychiatrists have to practice saying it.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
say it.
Exactly. I can even spell it now.
Right? And it seems to me the third element in that, the delayed remorse,
Mhm.
while that in itself is not brain-based, it
Yep.
occurs because of changes within the brain.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
delayed remorse is really the reason why a lot of individuals with FASD have delayed remorse, is that
Mm,
in the moment of stress and anxiety and chaos,
mhm.
our brains go on fire too much and we can't
Yeah.
see the things. And that's why so often, so many of the families that I work with, and my own experience with my daughter, and even my own experience as
Mhm.
myself with an adult with FASD, is that when my brain gets clear the next day, or when my daughter is settled down a few days later, we can talk. Sometimes it might be the same day, but a lot of times
Yeah.
it's a couple of days later.
Yeah.
And when we will talk about it, then she will feel regret and remorse over whatever the behavior or the thing is that might have occurred. And so, absolutely, that is a brain-based thing too,
Yeah.
because in the moments of dysregulation, when our brains go on fire, we can't see very clearly. And
Yeah.
that's true for all people, neurodivergent or neurotypical.
And I think a lot of it too, I think it happens so often for us,
Mhm.
living with FASD, is that one of the challenges we frequently have is perseveration, right? Not being
Mhm.
able to let go of something or holding on to something as being the most important,
Yes.
and everything else gets kicked to the curb. And it's only after that situation has been resolved that we're able to realize all the collateral damage that may have occurred
Mhm.
in whatever the situation was,
Right.
and oftentimes in the relationships that we have,
Right.
and to be very transparent, I can
Right.
bring an example from my social work career where there was a foster family that was grieving the loss of one of their members. But as a social worker, safety is the top priority. Safety in the home, safety of the kiddos, number one priority.
Yes.
And I was out in the home providing some comfort, seeing if there was anything that we could supply to just help the family through. And on the way out the door, it was a mobile home, and most mobile homes have steps
Mhm.
leading to the door. Going down the steps, the handrail was loose. Safety first, safety first, safety first. Back in the door I go. And I didn't demand that it got fixed right then and there. But
Yeah.
what I did say is, when you can get around to this, that'd be great.
Yeah.
In the meantime, please have the kiddo use the other door,
Mhm.
which I thought was a sensitive compromise.
Mhm.
I lived 7 miles from this home. By the time I got there, my boss had been contacted and got an earful about what an insensitive biatch I was, to which I was horrified,
Mhm.
absolutely horrified. So
Yes.
that's an example of delayed remorse,
Yes. Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
because, my boss was like, you really didn't have to address it yesterday.
Mhm.
You just didn't have to go there,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know,
But it is
but
hard when, if your brain is like mine, I get kinda stuck on things.
safety first.
Yep. Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So whereas anosognosia in that situation, it's an inability literally to see something.
Mhm. Yeah, it is, yeah, it's a deficit of self-awareness and insight,
Mhm.
and it's actually tied to lesions in the front lobe of the brain. It is absolutely a brain-based, disorder, and
Yeah.
it's a very common co-occurring one with schizophrenia, bipolar,
Body dementia.
dementia, yes, to all the various dementias
Yes.
and FASD. Now,
Yeah.
to my knowledge, there hasn't been research specific on this, and I'm really bummed because when I was at FASD United Impact Week this past September,
Yeah.
in 2025, I was on a panel of adults, with living experience. And that was one of the questions that Jen Wisdall asked is because it was a
Mhm.
room and online of people of researchers. They're like, what else do you
Yeah.
want researched? And I
Yeah.
did give some ideas and I was like, oh, shoot, I should have said anosognosia and the connection with FASD.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll work on that at the Seattle conference this year, trying to get some people interested in it.
Okay. So yeah, and I totally unrelated, but I have another call to action for FASD researchers.
Hmm.
Totally different topic.
Hmm.
Fascia.
Yes.
Fascia, right? There was an article on LinkedIn that talked about fascia. Fascia is that connective tissue that surrounds our organs,
Hmm.
right? And like if we're preparing chicken, it's that slimy bit
Yep.
between the
Yep.
skin and the meat,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
That we discard. And so the article was suggesting that
Mhm.
in the medical model, fascia is usually discarded as being unimportant, but what they're coming to understand is fascia holds the communication system, right? It
Very good. Mhm.
enables chemical messages and electrical signals to go throughout the body. So
Um,
it's not unimportant at all. And then you
right.
just expose, just, juxt, if I can say anosognosia, I can say anything. Gosh darn it. Juxtapose
Yep. You got it.
that reality, right? That it is involved in
Right.
in intra-body communication
Right.
with the reality that alcohol kills or changes anything that it connects with as it's being developed or programmed.
Yes.
And so that begs the question, what about prenatal alcohol exposure on the development and the programming of our fascia?
Right.
And what are all the physical implications of that? Hello, we need to study this.
Yes, please. Yeah, there's so much.
Think of the fallout from that. That could be
Right.
huge.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I'm great at coming up with outside the box ideas, but, I'm not
Yeah.
a researcher, so I can't do anything about
Yeah.
it.
Me neither.
But with the example that I raised a little bit ago about me being a social worker and being perseverating on safety first,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
If it were anosognosia,
Mhm.
then I would be unable to self-reflect on my role. I wouldn't see
Yeah,
what
you
I
would have
had done
seen.
wrong
Yeah,
because I'm just incapable of becoming aware that
exactly.
I have faults and
Right.
glitches and
Mhm.
quirks.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's fascinating too if you look at, and I really think that people, well, actually, I mean, I know this from all of the research I've done on just reading about anosognosia, is it can be compartmentalized too. And I would
Mm,
say that that's actually what my daughter has. My daughter is 26, and there are definitely many aspects of her life where she knows that she needs accommodations and supports and that she's not able to do on her own and stuff. But then there's
mm,
these other things where it's very clear to me and her team that she needs supports and she cannot see it no matter
mhm,
what. And
mm,
so some people have kind of the anosognosia with everything and they don't think there's anything wrong and they don't need help with anything. And then some people have this more
mhm,
compartmentalized version of it.
mm.
And it's all fascinating and it's all, challenging and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And, if anybody wants to learn more about anosognosia, I just recommend any of Dr. Javier Amador's work.
Ok
He wrote a book called I Am Not Sick, I Don't Need Help, and he's the
Oh,
one who created the LEAP method, and he has
okay.
the LEAP Institute even. He trains on this. There's great YouTube videos. I think there's a TED Talk he's done. When I dove into this 5 or 6 years ago, I remember when the pandemic was starting, I was in Manhattan when they were shutting down Broadway. I was
Oh,
presenting training in Manhattan, and I was reading that book, and I was sitting along the Hudson River, and, it literally had to fly home early, so it's one of those things you just remember, right?
yeah.
And I was reading this book and I was just fascinated by it and he's a psychologist and he
Mhm.
has a brother who had schizophrenia, and that was where he really kind of learned about this
Yeah.
and does wonderful work. So if people want to dig into it, look that up, the Leap Institute. But what he's created is his Leap method. And when I do coaching, whether it's the group coaching program I work in with Jeff Noble or when I'm doing individual coaching with caregivers, I share his LEAP method all the time. And so like an example of it would be, let's say we have a young person, doesn't even matter if they're an adolescent or an adult, who's maybe, does not want to take medication, but
Mhm.
yet everybody in their life knows that the medications are helpful for them, right? And that's a really common struggle that I hear from many of the families I'm working with. And that's when something we've struggled with our daughter as well.
Yeah.
So using the LEAP method, the L stands for listen.
Mhm.
So we would say to this young person, you know what, buddy, I really want to hear why you don't want to take the meds. Let's talk about it. Tell me what it is about the meds that you don't like. And
Mhm.
and we listen. And during this entire the LEAP, during this entire process, we don't yeah, but, or disagree. We are
Mhm.
listening. So the L
Yeah.
is listen. And maybe he or she is going to say, I don't like the way it makes me feel. I
Mhm.
can't sleep, I can't eat, or, whatever all of the different things are that they might be saying. Or maybe they're going to say, I just don't like being told what to do. I don't, both, they're all kind of
Mhm.
reasons that they might have, right? And then the E stands for empathize. So this is where I would say to them, I would say, you know what? I've taken some medications in the past that didn't make me feel great either. And even when I've had surgeries and had to take pain medication, it helps with the pain, but then it also makes me feel icky. And, like, so you do
Yeah.
this empathizing with
Makes me
them.
hurl.
Yeah, exactly. Constipated, all the things it does, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so we can empathize, and then
Yeah.
the A stands for agree. And then I would say,
Yeah.
yeah, but can you agree though that, when the past, when you took them, it seemed like you were able to function better at school, or you weren't getting in as much trouble, or
Mhm.
whatever the things are, whatever, we're like, can we get to a place of agreement on that?
Yeah.
And then the P is the really important part. And this LEAP method is a bit similar to Ross Greene's collaborative problem solving
Mhm.
model, which I love as well.
Yeah.
But the P stands for partner. So that's where I would then say, I really heard what you're saying. And you've made some really excellent points. And I can understand why this is frustrating. But, we've also been able to agree that, things aren't going really well right now, and that this might be something that's helpful. And I'm not, this is just one
Yeah.
example. I'm not saying we
Right.
should shove
Right.
meds down these individuals' throats by any means. But, can we figure out a way to partner on this? And maybe we can do a trial. Maybe we can talk to
Mhm.
your doctor and try one medication. Let's talk and see. And we're going to do it as a trial. And let's every week, once or twice on Wednesday and Sunday or whatever it is, we're
Mhm.
going to sit and talk. And I want to hear what you're thinking and feeling about it. I'll
Yeah.
share with you anything I'm noticing, and we'll really see how you're
Yeah.
feeling. And if those icky things are happening that you were just shared, then we'll figure out a different thing,
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that. It's so much better than just telling them you need meds. You do better when you're on meds,
Yeah. Yeah.
shoving it down their throats when they
Yeah.
can't
Because
see it.
nobody likes to be told what to do.
No,
That's
exactly.
human nature. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, can you distinguish for the audience when it might be denial versus anosognosia?
Well, yes. One
Like
of the
with this medication issue, right?
Right. One of the biggest things is looking at, is there any logic in what's going on, right?
Mhm.
Like, so, one of the things that we know is that, individuals with FASD, we don't always have the best logical thinking. And so, does whatever they're saying sound illogical or not, or things like that? And, but even again, when you're doing that LEAP method, if we really
Mhm.
actually stop and listen to these individuals and what it is that they're sharing, it really is pretty powerful. And I don't think we do
Mhm.
that enough. We don't
Yeah.
really listen
And we
to.
can follow that logic, faulty it
Mhm.
as it may be,
Yes,
but that's where we find the commonality to together make some
right.
changes to tweak whatever's going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about this, about figuring out if it is denial or if it's anosognosia, it's kind of the same thing I do when I work with families on, is this individual lying or are they confabulating, right? And I always just
Yeah.
say,
Two other things that look a lot alike.
they look a lot alike, and I always
Yeah.
say, doesn't matter. You respond the same way, right? You
Mhm.
respond in a connected, relational way by
Yeah.
listening and approaching it differently. So in some ways, even if it is denial, if you still approach it with the listening, with the empathy, with the agreeing and
Mhm.
the partnering, and this more connected kind of approach instead of the heavy hammer approach that we love to do,
Yeah.
and the shoving it down their throat kind of
Yeah.
approach, uh, that's an important thing. And I'm doing coaching with, some teenagers who are on the spectrum. Their families are having me do that. And that's one of the things, some of the caregivers will say is, I really need you to help them understand their disability. And I said, well,
Mhm.
I can do some work on that. And especially since I'm diagnosed with it as well, that, there's that
Mhm.
camaraderie and that kind
Right.
of stuff.
Right.
If they've got some anosognosia going on, if we just keep shoving this diagnosis down their throat, all it's going
Yeah.
to do is impact that relationship,
Right.
with between the support people, the
Yeah. And
parents,
raise stress levels, which is
raise
going to
stress
send
levels,
behavior out the window. Yeah.
impact self-esteem,
Yeah.
all of those kind of things. So really, that's where we have to look and
Yeah.
really figure out, if this is anosognosia, back off of trying to shove it down their throat,
Mm.
and figure out how to accommodate.
Yeah. I know with denial, there is full awareness of what is true and real.
Mhm.
and awareness of motivation and intent,
Right.
but it's a clear choice,
Right.
right?
Yes.
To take a different path, present something different, to hide, to deceive. With anosognosia, the awareness is not there
Mhm.
of various aspects. May not be the whole situation,
Right.
but of a certain aspect. And versus delayed remorse, the awareness kind of trickles in steps, right?
Absolutely. And delayed
Yeah.
remorse is almost always connected to dysregulation and stress and
Mhm.
anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens is a lot of our individuals with FASD or other neurodivergence, we have these moments where we freeze. We go
Mhm.
into the freeze, fight, flight when we get down into that
Yeah.
primitive brain and the survival
Yeah.
amygdala. We go into, and so sometimes it's blurting out, sometimes it's verbal aggression, all of these different things, right? And
Mhm.
in that moment, most of the time they cannot see it, right? They
Right.
cannot see it in that moment. And this happens all the time, but maybe a few hours later, but a lot of times it might be a day or two later, right?
Mhm.
Because, for neurodivergent people with trauma histories, it can take at least 24 hours to
Yeah.
completely recover from a stressful thing.
Yes.
For
Yeah.
neurotypical people without a ton of trauma, it takes usually 2 hours for our bodies to completely recover physically
Mhm.
and emotionally.
Mhm.
So we're often sitting here with this
And
individual trying to talk through this, and they're
yeah.
not ready yet.
Yeah. I've seen research that it's 72 hours
Yeah, I mean, it's a minimum
for
of
us to
24 hours.
recover.
Yes. Yeah, it takes days
'Cause
usually.
yeah, I remember having a conversation with someone about I had upcoming appointments at Mayo Health Clinic, and I don't know why it is. I don't know if it's because they want a bill or if they don't trust other people's testing,
Mhm.
but oftentimes you go to a new specialist and they want to repeat all the tests that have been done,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
one of the complications I have from the diabetes is peripheral neuropathy.
Mm, mhm,
And I've had the testing on that done a few times. It's called an EMG, where they hook
mhm.
you up with electrodes and they stimulate it and they measure the length of time that it takes for the signal to get from like your toe to your hip,
Right,
right?
right.
And let me tell you, every time I go through that, I think I'm going to get drunk before I go through this again. I'll show up drunk. It's the only way I can think of to make it bearable, but since the appointments are usually in the middle of the day, that means
Right.
going back to work drunk? No, you can't do that.
Not a good idea.
Wouldn't be prudent.
Not a good plan.
Not a good plan.
That's funny.
So, but it's awful, right?
Mhm,
And so I had this appointment coming up and I knew that they wanted to do another EMG.
mhm.
And I'm like, I'm not interested in that.
Yeah,
This particular complication has been well documented since 1983.
right,
What's the point?
right.
Right? And the person I was talking to was like, well, and you're going to be dysregulated. It anyway, I was talking with a friend and colleague about, my anxiety for, how am I going to handle this? How am I going to convince them to not do this study? Because if I argue with it ahead of time, they might decide not
Right,
to see me.
right. Yeah, and you don't want that with the mayo especially.
Right? But I really don't want to undergo this again.
Mhm,
So there was a lot of anxiety. And there's always just traveling to a
mm,
different state, flying, hotel,
yes.
wondering, are you going to get from the hotel to the facility on time? Yeah, I mean, it's just such an anxiety provoking thing to begin with.
Mhm,
And
yes.
my friend was like, yeah, and you're going to be dysregulated for 72 hours afterward.
Great fun.
And it's like, I don't think that's going to ruin the whole trip.
Yep, yep, absolutely it
So
will.
I did get out of it.
Oh, good, good for you. You've become so good at advocating, right? You know how to advocate for yourself.
Well, I developed that skill long before I
Yes.
knew I had FASD because,
Mhm,
just I had to
mhm.
with the
Yeah,
diabetes. I wouldn't be here if I had not developed
yep,
that skill.
right, right,
So,
absolutely.
oh my goodness.
Another common time when, when I can see anosognosia playing in particular for our younger population, or, the children and teenagers, is not wanting special education services. And, like, again, no kid is going to want to be in special ed, right? Of course you don't want that. And, I'll have families
Yeah.
all the time say, I don't want my kid to have that label. And I'm like,
I
I
was
don't like,
gonna bring that up.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like
Yeah.
using that term as a label. I'm like, so what you're saying is you don't want your kid to be the best version of themselves. You don't want them to thrive because
What a good comeback.
they need accommodations
Yeah.
to thrive and be their best
Yeah.
version of who they are, right?
Yeah.
It's not a label. It is
Yeah.
what they need to succeed in the school
Yeah.
setting. And so,
Yeah.
I always try to push back a little bit when I hear that label stuff. It's the same with
And the other piece
FASD.
of it too is unsupported behavior, right? The
Mm,
acting out or
yes,
the difficulty with social skills. I mean, all of
yes.
that stuff
Hmm.
creates its own label.
Yes. Oh,
So,
exactly.
it doesn't
Exactly.
have to be a diagnosis to be a label.
Yep. And if we
Yeah.
wait too long to get our kids the right interventions and supports they need within the school setting, it can have very negative
Mhm.
consequences, right? Because then we're going to
Mhm.
have the adolescent who's in school refusal, who's starting to skip, who's getting
Yeah.
truancy, who's now involved in the justice
Yeah.
system. And it's just can be this huge snowball. And
Yeah.
not all of our kids need, IEPs or supports like that, but many of them are going to need
Right.
that and stuff. And I totally get where they're resistant to that. But
Mm.
and so there's probably a small portion of them who they just don't want, that support because they don't want to
Yeah.
feel different and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of those ones that are really, really fighting it are likely ones that do have anosognosia.
So how do you see this in your practice in adults? And whether it's FASD or
Mhm.
ADHD or autism or brain injury,
Right.
how do you
Well,
see these three things
you know,
playing out with different neurodivergencies?
anosognosia, I just see it playing out where I just see it having such a huge impact on the relationship between the adult and their people, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
their parents, their support team, their guardian, their whoever
Their
it is.
spouse.
Yeah, their spouse, their significant other. It has such an impact on that. And what I love about Dr. Amador when he talks about it, he'll say something like, maybe let's say he uses the example of schizophrenia all the time, right? But let's say I have schizophrenia and my husband's telling me you need to get on your meds or you need to go inpatient or I'm
Mhm.
leaving. And
Mhm.
my boss is saying you are off the rails. You've got to get this taken care of, or and the doctors
Yeah.
are if everybody is telling me that, and I literally cannot see this because I have these lesions in my lobe, and and it looks like everybody thinks I'm denying this and just
Mhm.
don't want the help, but I literally can't see it. You're going to get pretty paranoid. And if you
Yeah.
look at the
Yeah.
classic in schizophrenia, person with
Yeah.
schizophrenia, and the paranoia that can come into with that, of course you're going to get paranoid if everybody's telling you this and you
Yeah.
cannot see it. So I just see, so I just, it's hard with adults too. And, I talk a lot with families that I'm working with about what we need to do with adults is we need to normalize that we all have support people in our life,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
I hate the term independent. I want it to be wiped out
In
of our
Yeah.
systems of care. It's a bunch of
Interdependent.
bull poop.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so I like interdependence, right? We
Yeah.
all have people around us. And so when I'm talking with families all the time, I say, like you need to write down who's on your team so they can see it,
Mhm.
right? Is it your
Mhm.
boss? Is it your therapist? Is it your doctor? Is it your significant other?
Yeah.
Is it your
Yeah.
phone? Like I always say this, if my phone didn't remind me of things that I have it set up to remind me, I wouldn't
Yeah.
get anything done anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and then I also talk about, find a famous person that this person idolizes, whether it's a professional athlete, a celebrity, a business person, whatever it is, and say, okay, let's, we could pull anybody out. We could say, an Olympic star, we're in the Winter Olympics now. Or we could
Right.
say Anthony Edwards from the Minnesota Timberwolves, 'cause I'm a Minnesotan at heart, right? He's out there tearing it up on the court, but he's got this huge team of people around him. But our
Mhm.
kids and adults with FASD don't see that. They don't see that
Yeah.
his coach, they'll see the coach telling him what to do, but they don't see his agent who does his contracts, who does his press releases.
Mhm.
They don't see his assistant who schedules his stuff. He probably has a driver who drives him to a lot of places. He's got a
Yeah.
nutritionist, a physical trainer, all these people
Yeah.
telling him what to do, where to be, what not to do.
Yeah.
And our
Yeah.
kids, individuals don't see that because of their concrete brains.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
don't see that. So we have to make it concrete and show them some
Yeah.
things. Really, it's if we understand the brain better, we can figure out better ways to support these individuals so they
Yeah.
don't feel so
Yeah.
weird and different
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
things like that that we'll hear from
I thought of a classic example of anosognosia on steroids. Hoarders.
them. Hmm.
Hoarders. So I think most people watching this have seen the show Hoarders on TV,
Right.
right? Or even just the ads for it. And that's a common theme.
Yeah.
The individual hoarder cannot
Yeah.
comprehend why the people in their world are so upset
Yeah.
about their living condition.
Mhm.
They're
Yep.
totally blind to it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And hoarding is a
Yeah.
brain-based thing too. It
Yeah.
really is. And it's a common thing with our individuals with FASD is hoarding,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
see that also with various forms of dementia. People that
Mhm.
maybe didn't hoard before their brains were compromised by whatever type of dementia they have now are
Yeah.
hoarding. So
Yeah.
there's so much proof to us that that is a brain-based thing too, and not
Mhm.
just a
Mhm.
choice and a behavior that people are choosing to do.
Right. Right. Although I find it interesting, maybe not. Maybe it's not coincidence. Hoarding was not on the list of 428 comorbidities.
Right? Yep, probably wasn't.
Nobody wants to fess up to that one.
Nope. You're right. Funny. Funny.
Oh my goodness. Momentary flash of brilliance. Over in a flash. So, what are some things that you do to support people with the delayed remorse? Is there something that we can do to shorten that time frame?
You know, I think so. So first of all, when our individuals are in their moments of dysregulation and stress and anxiety, it's in those moments, the more that we can back off and stop talking. Like that's one
Hmm.
of the biggest problems we all have is we keep talking and we need to shut the up, right? We just have to stop talking. And so
Tell us how you really feel
and
about that,
leave
Barb.
myself out there. How do you like that? Because the thing
Yeah.
is that so often, if we, the people in their lives, can change our responses in those moments, it's not
Mhm.
going to blow up as badly.
Right.
And
Right.
that's something my husband and I learned the hard way too late in the game, right? But so it's that first of all, but
Yeah.
also it's just backing off and giving them the space that they need. The more that we can just back off and give them that space. And sometimes I even had a family once who they were like, a couple hours after this big blow up and stuff like that, they were trying to do some connecting things, right? They were trying
Mm.
to ask their kids, questions about actually a storm that had just happened a few days ago or something like a literal tornado or something. They were trying to ask questions and bring something up they knew that this young person was interested in. And, right intention, but it was the wrong timing. They just
Yeah.
were not ready yet. And so,
Yeah.
again, that's where we just have to, the more that we can just back up and not, and again, they weren't trying to talk about what the blow up was. So they thought it
Yeah.
was innocent and okay to do, which I
Yeah.
understand. Again, when you're
Yeah.
thinking logically, that
That
kind of
makes sense
makes
from a
sense.
neurotypical perspective.
Exactly. But when we understand what's going on in their brain and body,
Yeah.
that is the cue to us to just shush up and just
Yeah.
wait. And what I talk about then is what I always say is wait several days. And when I train schools, I talk about this too. And one of my favorite things, I was doing an in-person training at a school once with their entire staff. I think they gave me a 3 or 4 hours, which is rare. They love to give you an hour or something. anyways, I was talking about this. I was talking about that, about how it takes several days for many of them. And I said, I hate reentry meetings after you guys suspend students. And I said, first of all, I want you to stop suspending our students. But
Mhm.
second of all, if sometimes you might have to, right? If there was a huge aggressive thing, they don't really have many choices then. But
Right.
when they come
Right.
back, reentry meetings are a joke, right? Who
Yeah.
doesn't walk into that reentry meeting, parent and student, stressed and anxious? The
Yeah.
brain's on fire when you walk
On
in there
pins
because
and
you know you're going
needles.
to get lectured, you know? And so I said, instead, let them come back and just start their day. You welcome them back. You make them feel like they belong, because they
Yeah.
do belong. And then sometime, whether it's that day or during that week, when you see them in a good brain place, you pull them aside and say, hey, dude, let's talk about what happened. I'm
Mhm.
not mad at you. You're not in trouble. Just
Yeah.
here's in a boom, 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 and done, and move on. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what was cool when I was doing this one school is, at the end of the meeting, the principal came up to me and said, the social worker and I just canceled the reentry meeting that was scheduled for tomorrow morning. And I was like, yay, my work here is done. But yeah, so it's really just
It
giving them the space and the
yeah.
time, and even just being okay with silence and letting
Yeah.
them have their space. And
Yeah.
then usually they will come around more quickly if we
Being
just,
okay with silence is a big challenge.
oh yeah, it's
It's a
really
big
hard.
challenge. So,
Mhm,
and part of there's so many reasons for this. I'm
mhm.
thinking delayed processing,
Yes.
right? If
Yes.
you're only hearing every third word
Yes.
of what
Yes.
is being spoken to
Yes.
or asked of you, and you say what or I don't know in order to buy time to finish
Mhm.
processing, right? The other person typically will be like, "Oh, they don't understand. Let me explain a different way." And they
Right.
use even more words that's
Yes.
going to require even more time to process.
Yes.
And
Yep.
it's filling up that space with more and more words
Mhm.
that just adds so many levels of confusion
It does, they've
and
got delayed.
chatter and noise instead of just being quiet,
Mm,
using fewer words, and
yep.
giving more time.
Yeah. Yeah. And being mindful of our language too, because
Yeah.
often we are saying shaming things without even realizing it. I mean, I was just doing a group coaching session a few weeks ago or a month ago, maybe now. And this one really phenomenal caregiver I've been working with for years was talking about her 18-year-old son, and this blow that they had in the car. And I'm like, well, let's like rewind and like, go through word for word. And one of the things that she said to him was, right before he kind of blew up, was this a new girl? And I said, okay, hold on, let's break that apart here. How do you think that was
Mhm.
perceived? The way you
Yeah.
phrased that made him feel judged.
Mm.
It made him feel judged, and it's another new girl or whatever. And she was like, holy crap, you're right.
That's not what I meant.
That's not
Yeah.
what she meant. She didn't even mean it like that, but that's how
Yeah.
he perceived it, and that's actually
Yeah.
how it came off. And so, like, so a lot of times it's, working with ourselves to have somebody that you can run things by. Like,
Mhm.
this is why I love coaching so much. I
Yeah.
love coaching caregivers and professionals on this stuff, because I still screw up and say the wrong thing, and my
Mhm.
husband will call me on it, right? And I call him on stuff like that. We used to always have when I train, I always talk about this, but look back when our kids were living with us and we're at home and
Mhm.
stuff like that. You know how you would catch your spouse getting pulled into a power struggle or whatever it is, and and I'd be like, Michael, stop, or he'd be like, Barb, enough, or
Yeah.
whatever. And now you feel
Yeah.
dumb. So for us, we came up with a code phrase, and it was, I keep forgetting to tell you, we're almost out of milk, which meant shut the bleep up. And I'm saying,
Mhm.
now this only works in a two-parent household, but it's a
Yeah.
way to tag team the other one out when they're kind of starting to lose it,
Yeah. Yeah.
which happens often.
And that's great between partners, right? If
Mhm.
you're helping a child, but there's probably other code that we could come up with
Yes.
for
Yes.
a teenager to be able to tell their parent,
Yes.
I need to reset,
Absolutely.
you know?
This 12-year-old girl that I've been coaching and working with her parents, like, we just came up with I was trying to ask her, another kid I had done this with a while ago, we kind of came up with this hand, so you can't put your hand on your head and your stomach. That meant your brain and your stomach are on fire, is what this little girl liked. And so
Mhm.
if she went like that, that was the symbol to her parents to stop everything
Yeah.
right now, because I'm about to
Yeah.
lose it. And I'm right. And so this other little girl, she didn't like that symbol. And so we came up with, if she just puts one finger up like this, that's the sign, that's the code to her
Mhm.
parents that she's about to lose it and to slow
Yeah.
down. Now, she
Yeah.
doesn't use it every time, but we just kind of came up with this 2 months
Yeah.
ago. And I'm like, even if she just does it 10% of the time right now, that's a
That's a
win.
good start.
That we're decreasing it by 10%. And if you keep
Yeah.
doing it, because, it's repetition, repetition,
Yeah.
repetition with our kiddos.
Yeah. 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 What a fantastic discussion. I'm still wanting to tease out, are there conditions, are there neurotypes rather,
Hmm.
that tend to lean one way versus another? For instance, like the dementia, was like, yeah,
Hmm.
that's anosognosia
Yes.
all the
Yes.
way.
Yes.
Um, and I've seen that in my interactions with my mother.
Right. Right.
When, because I use all these skills that we talk about when we're working with families and adults with
Hmm.
FASD or whatever neurotype it is. I use them all with my mom,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
because she definitely has major, major brain changes.
Yes.
But it's hard to remember to interact with her
Right.
as someone with a brain injury,
Hmm. Yeah.
and that she's not the mom who raised me
Right.
anymore,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I can go over and I can explain things, talk about need for repetition.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a lot of anosognosia, her
Yes.
complete inability to recognize that there
Yes.
was anything wrong in what
Mhm.
she had done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and,
Like
I think
like feeding the dogs from the table. It's cost us thousands of dollars in vet bills.
right, right, right. Yeah, it's exhausting. That in my blog post that's on my website about anosognosia that I wrote a few weeks ago, what spurred me to write it, I train about anosognosia a lot of the time when I train on FASD if I have enough time. And but Bruce Willis's wife, Bruce Willis,
Mm.
who has, I think he has Lewy body, right?
He has frontal
No,
lobe.
frontal temporal. Yeah, he has
Yeah,
frontal temporal,
frontal
but
temporal lobe
his
dementia.
wife gave an update and she said he has anosognosia. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay. So I'm like, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to
Yeah,
kind of bring this out into the light some
yeah,
more here. And so it's so common with various populations like that.
yeah,
Now, denial is really common. I see that being a pretty common thing in the substance use world, like for people that are struggling with substance use
yes.
disorders.
Denial, it's not a river in Egypt.
Exactly, exactly. But what complicates that is then we have individuals with FASD who are struggling with substance use disorders.
Mhm.
And so then,
Yeah,
then it's trickier to tease out, is it denial or is it anosognosia, or a healthy dose
yeah,
of both, probably.
yeah, 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 for sure.
Hmm.
And I think with the denial, it's key to know that, like, if you're dealing with addictions, once that person has put in the work of recovery and is sober, they're able to look back
Yes,
at their behavior, their statements, their
yes,
way
yes,
that they think, and
yes,
recognize the cognitive errors
yes,
and own them and do things differently and
yes,
choose things differently moving forward.
yes. Yeah,
Whereas you don't get that with the anosognosia,
right.
right?
Absolutely. Well, and I would say too that probably a lot, I don't even remember what the current research is on how many times somebody with substance use disorders goes through treatment. I know it's many. It's usually not a
Mhm.
one and done thing,
Right.
but the individuals who have to go through treatment, 10 or more times, I'll bet you there's some anosognosia often in many of
Mhm.
those cases going on.
Yeah. And I think too that a lot of it is that there's, this just me, my humble opinion. There's a lot of FASD going on that the staff of the treatment facilities are completely ignorant about.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
and our need for, as neurodivergent people,
Yes,
our need to learn things differently and to process things differently is not supported
yes,
in those traditional models, those
Right.
traditional approaches.
Right.
And it takes a lot of repetition for things to stick.
Yes, it does.
And systems cannot necessarily provide
Mhm.
that much time, that much grace,
Right.
that much support, but they're especially not going to if they don't understand the
Mhm.
neurological differences
Right.
that people impacted by whether it's substances or alcohol or whatever prenatally, we've just been rewired.
Mhm. Yep.
And that's not necessarily bad, it's just different.
Very different. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's just part of human nature to assume that everybody processes things the way I do,
Mhm.
right? Everybody has that perspective
Yes.
of the world. People's experiences are like mine.
Mhm.
And there can be the cognitive awareness that life is different for other people.
Right.
But, as they do say in addictions world, this is the longest distance in the world
Yeah.
between knowing something intellectually and accepting it,
Exactly.
right? And believing it. And that's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, this has been just a delightful conversation. I hope that people will write in to the audience, hint, hint, write in with any questions you can have because we can revisit this.
Yeah.
It's definitely concepts that were worthy of the deep dive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think this has just been very valuable and I'm so appreciative of your coming back on and doing this candid conversation with me.
Yeah, my
So,
pleasure anytime. It's always
yep,
fun to chat with you.
I'll take you up on that, Barb.
All right. Thanks, Patty.
I'm so glad that you tuned in to today's candid conversation, and I hope that you found it valuable in adding a depth and breadth to your understanding of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And I hope that we made you laugh along the way. I'm so honored to bring you these candid conversations each week and that you've made me part of your lives. If this podcast, Living with FASD, has been valuable, then please go to www.womenpodcasters.com/awards during the month of April and vote for Living with FASD, and you might see my name as well, Patricia Kasper, to win Podcast of the Year in the Women Podcasters competition. Also, you can reach out to me at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com with any topics that you'd like me to cover or guests that you'd like to hear from, or even just to say hello, because I'd love to hear your story. If you want to order a copy of my book, Sip by Sip, Candid Conversations with Adults Living with FASD, the links to order are in the show notes, as is my Calendly link if you'd like to book a complimentary call to discuss any coaching or training needs that you might have through my company, Kasper's FASD Life Coaching and Training LLC. If today's guest has provided contact information, then you're also going to find that in the show notes. Again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to tune in and watch or listen to this candid conversation. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share the podcast, because it's through sharing it that more people discover it and learn about FASD. So have a great week, everybody. That's a wrap. We'll see you again next time on Living with FASD. Bye-bye for now.